Thank you, Ajit. I'll just try to be fairly short and crisp, and I'll give my remarks for about 4 or 5 minutes and follow on from what Ajit had said and what the previous speaker had said. So some interesting sets of things here. So when we talk about competitiveness, it's all about productivity. And it's about productivity from land, labor, and capital. And when we really talk about these things, like the question is, like, how is digitalization enabling the productivity of all these things? Like, so how is it making land more productive or resources more productive? Can I actually increase the value that is happening here? So quite interestingly or fundamentally, the biggest thing that is happening is through digitization is that we have been able to reduce the level of information asymmetry that exists in the system. When I say information asymmetry is at multiple levels. Like one is, how is the business to business interface happening, or how is the government to business interface happening, or how is the government to government interface happening? The information asymmetry has reduced dramatically at this point in time. When you say information asymmetry, like how people are able to compete or how people are able to work together. So that is one very big thing. The second thing that has happened is a very clear aspect of trust. When you talk about information asymmetry getting reduced or information becoming freely available, it enhances the level of trust that exists within the system. So the trust level, if you really talk about it, like one of the drivers for competitiveness is trust and how people are willing to share information. In fact, the willingness of sharing information is also driven by the whole IP regime that is actually getting developed, because it is also really pushing forward the whole idea of innovation within the system. But having said all these things, there are a couple of points which I thought I should share with you. We have talked about Aadhaar, but then if you really look at it, what has Aadhaar done? It has been able to create an identification for people, which becomes a very important point in terms of like how direct benefit transfers are happening. The level of leakages that actually used to exist within the system have reduced. But moving beyond that, the biggest thing that has happened on digitization, we do talk about Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile, the JAM Trinity, but a certain set of numbers here. The tele density in India is close to about 90% today, or 91%. 1,200 million people are having access to mobiles. But what does this do? Is this number just in thin air? India being one of the cheapest locations for mobile data and things, but then this has a huge multiplier on the economy itself. Let me share some numbers here. Today, India actually uses far more data than whole of United States put together. So if you really look at it, like India has become a very data-centric location. So it is not only about how people are using information, how businesses are using information, there is an economic multiplier to it. In fact, we did this study to really understand as to what is the economic impact of penetration or increase in penetration of internet. With every 10% increase in penetration of internet, the economy multiplies by about 3.9%. So there is an economic multiplier that actually happens here. So what we are seeing today is with this huge effort, when we are able to make people move on to internet, when we are able to use information, reduce information asymmetry, it actually creates an economic multiplier. So when you say $5 trillion, is it achievable? Definitively yes, because these multipliers are actually going to come home to roost fairly quickly, because we are going to be seeing businesses which are going to see huge impact. Education is going to be one of the biggest things that is going to get transformed. In fact, when you talk about service delivery as well, in fact, one of the points that was actually made in the inaugural session was on, say, toilets or whatever. But then if you really look at it, like there is a multiplier here as well. And the multiplier here is very simple, because typically, if you really look at the numbers, there were close to about 5,000 children who were dying because of diarrheal deaths before this program actually started. That number has got reduced by close to 80%. So today, people or children are not dying because of diarrheal deaths. So like this is a huge change that has happened. In fact, from a social progress point of view, with all the activities that we see, what we have seen is that India has seen the highest level of progress on social progress indicators in the last 5 years than any other point in time in history. So these are some very positive impacts that we are actually seeing. But at the end of the day, it is also about movement of goods that we were really talking about. Ajit did touch upon it, but then the biggest thing that happens on movement of goods, he talked about GST. But what I'm saying is what GST enables. GST enables smooth movement of goods. So that is actually reducing the level of friction that actually used to exist in the system. So the logistics have actually become far easier. Today what we are seeing is that there are going to be productivity gains which are going to last over a period of time. In fact, a very simple idea like, say, FASTag, a lot of people have got very disenchanted with it, like a lot of people criticize. But a simple thing like FASTag, has a huge impact on how I actually move people on the roads itself. So these are the few things that we will have to really look at. But at the end of the day, this is also about, when you talk about financial inclusion, this is all driven by the whole idea of digitization. But what we are seeing here is, it is a very simple idea of ease of living. How we are actually catering to, say, the basic human needs. How am I actually empowering people? How am I actually empowering citizens? Because a lot of people forget, there are two aspects to development. And the two aspects to development are, it is about social objectives and economic objectives. If I'm not fulfilling my social objectives, I will never be able to grow economically, because you will become stagnant over a period of time. It's a very clear theoretical construct. You can see the data that if I'm not moving up on social enabling factors, I will actually stagnate on economic indicators. So what we are seeing now is that there is a huge impetus on those social indicators, and we are going to see that multiplier as we actually go along. And that multiplier is becoming fairly visible. In fact, the previous speakers have also talked about it. Like, we are seeing that multiplier in terms of like how people are enabling taxes, or how people are looking at filing tax returns, and so on and so forth. So having said this, I think there was one more thing that Ajit did touch upon. He did not touch upon the numbers, but I thought I should touch upon the numbers on Hindustan Zinc. In fact, when you talk about disinvestments, this whole idea of digitization is really going to push forward into disinvestment of many interesting sets of businesses, enabling those sets of disinvestments, and so on and so forth. But let me give you a number here. The number is very interesting. Hindustan Zinc, when it actually got sold, or when it was privatized, sold is a very wrong word, when it was privatized, its valuation was just about 1,000 crores. Do you know what is the valuation of that business today? It is 120,000 lakh crores. That is an amazing value creation that can actually happen through privatization. People just do not realize that privatization can create multipliers in economy. Because that 120,000 crores has also increased a lot of taxes that go into it. Like Hindustan Zinc, 48% or 52% of its revenues go into taxes. So there is a huge multiplier that we are seeing here. But all these things put together, what I really see is there are three things, or three T's, that the government of India is now focusing on. It says technology, talent, and territorial assets. So in fact, when you talk about technology, that is what government of India is really focusing on. That is where you're talking about digital economy and enabling of, say, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. The second thing is talent, focusing on how people can actually get what I call skilled, and so on and so forth. Third being territorial assets. That is where you're talking about infrastructure. Because if I'm able to get this right, you are able to see multipliers. In fact, just a very last point here. The last point in terms of like wherever you have seen higher level of penetration of internet and information asymmetry being reduced, those are the states that have done well. So states of Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, they were actually very high on internet or access to information, and they did exceedingly well. So we need to take that to other level of states. If we are able to do that, the multiplier this country is going to be talking about is going to be huge. I think we are talking about a base level, at a basic situation which has been set right. And I think it is not about just 2024 that we will be able to do 5 trillion or whatever. For me, what is important here is that we are getting ready for a much bigger leap, which is going to go beyond 5 trillion. Because I think 5 trillion is a fairly small target for a country like India. It is going to be 20 trillion or whatever, if you really look at these multipliers in the next 25 odd years. So that is what we are really reaping or setting ourselves in the future. Thank you.